Good afternoon. It's pretty cool to be the last speaker that isn't part of the PC, so thanks for that, I guess. Like Mikkel introduced me, I'm Tom. I work at Cloudflare, and I'd like to, for the next 25 to 30 minutes, talk a bit about how Cloudflare approaches incident management and how that could map to some of you and maybe hopefully get some of the lessons that we learned so you don't have to make the exact same mistakes again. So, who am I and why am I up here and why am I even talking about this? Well, I have this unfortunate tendency of breaking things quite frequently, which means that I get involved in incidents quite frequently. The reason for that is I have two hats at Cloudflare. Partially, I'm the technical lead for the Edge network. So that means that, it's like I do kind of the technical responsibilities and the planning 6 months out, year out, on what we're going to do with our Edge network. But I'm also part of the backbone team. So Cloudflare has semi-recently started building out a backbone that is now international. So we span all of the continents. Backbones have this really annoying tendency of breaking, especially subsea cables. If any of you kind of run international networks, APJC or APAC right now is not a fun place to be. That's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So, like I said, why am I talking about this? Well, some of you may have seen articles like this, and these kind of articles keep popping up, and the articles keep popping up in more regular frequency. And that's because the internet is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and the internet is becoming significantly more fundamental to everything we do in our day-to-day lives, right? Like, it's hard to imagine 30, 40 years ago that the internet would be at the scale it's at right now, or the mere fact that we'd rely on the internet for basically everything we do in our day-to-day lives, or even require the internet to run our jobs, right? Like most of you or some of you might be doing remote-only jobs. You require the internet to do your job, otherwise, wouldn't be able to. So I kind of need to talk a bit about how do we deal with the internet when the internet breaks, because unfortunately the internet will break. And that's one of the first lessons, right? Is you kind of need to accept the fact that failure is possible, and then you move on from there. So what's incident management at Cloudflare? Is this playing? This is not playing. Oh, that's unfortunate. This is a GIF from community. Things on fire. Not great, but unfortunately it's not playing. So there we are. I guess incident management. So what's our process like? Some of you may have heard of ETIL. ETIL is a set of standards or best practices on managing a bunch of different things, including incident management. Thing is, we don't follow the ETIL process in any way or form. The reasons on why I'll explain throughout this talk, but again, not working. So one of our primary things that differs from ETIL is the fact that we don't have a dedicated incident team, right? Like ETIL kind of indicates that you have an incident team, and the incident team is responsible for dealing with any of the problems, and you kind of work through that. We don't have that, right? So for us, it is hypercritical that everyone is involved and active within the incidents, especially if there's incidents for their specific service that they're running on our edge or anything like that. It's very important for us to make sure that it's also just the individual engineers are available and that they understand what the problem is and kind of help us there. We do have a couple of key people available. So one of the key people, or basically the only key person in the incident besides the individual engineers kind of working on resolving the problem, is the incident commander. The easiest way to kind of look at the incident commander is their WD-40. For those of you that don't know what WD-40 is, it's grease. And it basically, you can consider it lubricant, right? Like it makes everything, their primary job, their only function really isn't technical contributions. It's making sure that anyone else that is making technical contributions is able to do this at the best of their capabilities, right? So it's checking or kind of asking if there's more people that need to be involved, if they have all the resources available to make sure that they can do the best of their jobs to the best of their abilities, and Incident commanders are all of the engineering managers, right? So we have multiple different kind of sub-organizations within Cloudflare, and a bunch of those have engineering managers. All of the engineering managers get added to a weekly rotation. So if you're an engineering manager and you're on the incident commander shift, that's a 7-day shift, and we kind of rotate through. We do try to follow a follow the sun system. For those of you that don't know what that means, it basically means 8-hour shifts to make sure that you as an incident commander don't get paged at 3 a.m. because brain no worky 3 a.m. kind of thing, unless you've already been awake, like some of us last night. So we use the follow the sun system. Basically 9 a.m. to roughly 6 p.m. is usually how the kind of rotation works. And we do that throughout. So let's talk a bit about our process. The easiest way that we kind of look at our process is 3 distinct steps. First step is detection. That should be quite obvious, I think, on what that basically means. It's figuring out, are things broken? Because surprisingly, that's not always as easy to figure out. Mitigation and remediation is very important for us. Like, it's very important to kind of make that distinction. Your mitigation is short-term fixes, right? It's the band-aid. It's making sure that, you know, like you lost an arm, stop the bleeding is the first critical part of you've lost an arm. And then the second part is get to the hospital so they can properly fix it. That's remediation. And the last but not least, but equally as important as any of the previous steps, it's reporting. So for detection, Cloudflare uses Alert Manager and Prometheus for basically our entire monitoring environment. For those of you that don't know, they're both open source tools written in Golang, and they allow you to export metrics, and then Alert Manager allows you to write rules that use those metrics to basically alert you on any given problem. So it's really important to kind of note here that you can only detect things that you know that can break. Right, that's a really annoying thing. Fortunately, we have this really cool benefit, and that really cool benefit is called customers. And customers have this really annoying tendency of not shutting up, especially when things break, which is great because even if our detection systems fail, even if we, for example, just didn't account for the fact that, oh, this is a thing that can actually break, our customers will be more than happy to remind us that that thing can definitely break. So that's the first part, right? Like we figured out, oh, damn, we fucked up. We broke something. Now what are we going to do? Next up, it's mitigation and remediation. So like I already mentioned, mitigation is your band-aid. Mitigation is just kind of making sure, let's stop the bleeding. So for us, what that usually means, if there's any, specifically if this is a network-related incident, for some other things we might not do that. But if it's a network-related incident, usually what we'll do is we'll drain the infrastructure that's affected, right? So Cloudflare has a massive Anycast network, which basically just means we'll stop advertising those Anycast prefixes from the impacted location. We even do that if there's software issues. We work with release trains and things like that to make sure that not all of our software, if we're making changes to our software, instantly hits the entire edge, because that would be awkward. So what we will do is we use a system called canaries. Canaries in a coal mine basically means they get production traffic, but it's less production traffic. So that means that if there's any issue with a release or any issue with anything that we've done, we'll know about it. There will be customer impact, unfortunately, but it's minimal, and we're still able to kind of easily drain the traffic to make sure that everything's okay. And then second part is remediation, because you can't just keep band-aids going, right? Like anyone that's had a cut and put a band-aid on, after about a week, it's not pleasant to look at the band-aid anymore. It's the same thing with code, right? It's like if you have code that's broken and you kind of put a band-aid in, it kind of gets like, it's nasty. It's like it's technical debt in one way or another that you kind of need to deal with. And that's where the remediation part comes in. It's getting a very good understanding and learnings from the problem you've had, and then putting in a solid and long-lasting mitigation, right? And that's where reporting comes into play. Reporting is basically as important as actually fixing the problem, because if you're not properly reporting on the problem you just experienced, how are you going to learn from it? And it's really important, and kind of a bunch of talks we've had before, like the talk that Alan had as well yesterday is you need to learn, like, making mistakes is fine. Making mistakes is important. Making mistakes is critical, but you also need to learn from them. And that's where reporting comes in. So we have a system, or we have a bot called respect tables. It's important to respect your tables. And respect tables is basically just this kind of nagging voice in the back of our head that basically reminds us about some of the things that we need to take care of. Incident hygiene, let's put it that way. So it will, there we go. So it will nag us, and we use Google Chat as our communication system. It will nag us about, it's like, oh, you need to update your status. It will nag us about that every 5 minutes, right? So we have an incident board that I can show you in a second. An incident board, and that incident board will show us all of the active incidents happening at the time. So engineering managers or VPs or SVPs or any of the higher ups can look at the incident board and instantly know what's the status of the Cloudflare network, right? They can kind of immediately understand if they wake up and they get into work, it's like, what's the status of Cloudflare? Do I need to step in? Do I need to start calling customers? Things like that. And one of the items reported there is the status of the incident. Now, if you've had an incident that's been going on for 2 hours or 3 hours and the last status update was an hour and a half ago, the likelihood of that status update being accurate or a good representation of what's currently going on is quite limited. So what respect tables will do is it will just nag us every 5 minutes, hey, set a status, set a status, set a status, just to kind of make sure that all of the information that we are presenting to both internal and as well as external teams is accurate. So this is the incident board I mentioned earlier. The green thumb is the good one. Basically means nothing's broken. Fairly rarely. There's always something broken in one way or another, unfortunately. But what you can see here is it has like the last status update. It also has like the last status comment. Those are two really critical parts because that allows teams or managers that weren't involved in the initial creation of the incident to kind of quickly get up to speed and quickly understand what was going on. Another aspect is all of the previous things I just talked about is internal, right? The incident board is not public, never going to be public for hopefully obvious reasons. But what we do have is Cloudflare status. So Cloudflare status is a status page that allows us to very quickly, very accurately update our customers on the status of the global Cloudflare network. What's really important here is some of you may recognize this IP space that are present in the room. That's not Cloudflare IP space. Cloudflare specifically is like the 104/12 range, if any of you know that. So that's kind of where we're at. This is clearly not Cloudflare IP space. It is Google IP space. Also, thank you, Google, for having that an RPKI ROA on there. Just need to make sure that, I'm not sure if Job is still in the room. Just need to make sure that RPKI has been mentioned. Therefore, please sign your routes. But yeah, it's like this is Google IP space. The reason for that is that if we're hosting our Cloudflare status page on Cloudflare infrastructure and we break Cloudflare infrastructure, how do we update our customers, right? So this is entirely on separate infrastructure that we do not manage, do not own in any way or form. This is a product that we just buy from a different company that we're able to kind of update to make sure that if we're horribly, horribly broken, that we can still update our customers to tell them that we're horribly, horribly broken, even though the likelihood of them knowing is high. But, it's the principle of the thing. And then last but not least, it's incident reviews. So we just wrote this like really cool report on, we made an update on a firewall rule and we started black holing traffic, for example. Then you write that report, you write out, okay, so what's the thing that happened? How did it happen? And how do you make sure that never happens again, right? Those are the three critical parts of a report for us. What we'll do is once a week, usually on a Friday, Fridays are fun days for that, is usually on the Fridays, we'll go through each and every incident that happened in the last 7 days. The incident commander or the engineering manager responsible for the service that was broken will quickly run the rest of the team through that incident. They'll talk on, well, this is what happened, this is how we remediated it, and this is how we make sure that going forward, we're never going to have the exact same incident again, because that's always the really hard part to explain to customers. If you've had an incident and then 6 months later or a year later or 2 years later, you have the exact same incident, customers have the brain of an elephant. They remember things. They remember things for a very painfully long time, which means that after a while, they'll go, wait, I remember this happening before. Why didn't you, like, I thought you told us you'd fix this. Why is this happening again? So we need to make sure that whatever we put in place is a sufficient remediation so that it can't happen again. But last but not least, what we'll also do during the review is what could we have done better? Because we're all human, and humans fail, and humans make mistakes. So we need to make sure that we understand what were the mistakes we made, because there's always going to be some mistake made in one way or another, even if it's the most obvious thing of, oh, we should have paged a different team, or we shouldn't have paged a different team. The very simple things that you can still learn from, can still move forward from, but also that you can put systems in place so that that mistake can be made again. Because, like I said, humans have this annoying tendency of failing or making mistakes. If you put systems in place that that failure isn't possible, then you're good, right? Like, it's guardrails. So that's kind of where we go. And then sometimes during review, what will also come up is we should talk about this. We should talk about this publicly, right? Some of you may have seen this. Like, there is a reason why the nickname of Cloudflare is occasionally Blogflare. We like blogging about things, and sometimes we'll blog about the issues we've had, the problems we've had, a specific incident. Like, for example, like last year, we had to blog about a mistake we made in building out some resilience, and that took down about 50% of our traffic. That's not great when that happens, and we decided very quickly and very early on that customers are going to want more information than the information we usually report on them, right? Our enterprise customers, they can request incident reports. These are redacted, mostly redacted reports of the incident we had. But in some very specific, very public cases, like the incident last year, we decide that it's better for everyone involved to be as open as possible about this, explain what the mistake was, explain how we're going to fix the mistake, and explain how the mistake can never be made again. Because, again, it's like it's at that point something that's beyond our enterprise customers, right? It's a problem that was noticed by the entire internet. At that point, it behooves us to kind of teach, use it as a learning moment for everyone else on the internet. It's like, well, this is a mistake we made. In that specific case last year, it's term ordering is apparently important. If you have a then reject at your end, then you need to make sure that all of the prefixes that you want to advertise don't end up after, because that's not going to do much. So that's kind of where we're at, right? So to kind of summarize everything, I'll go back for that, if that works. Clicker is a bit slow. Come on. There we go. So to kind of summarize the entire process that I kind of just walked through, first of all, is your detection. It's figuring out what's broken. The really critical parts here is metrics. Be as verbose as possible, right? It's the best important thing. Even if you report metrics that you're never think are going to be an issue, trust me, it's going to be an issue. And then you have mitigation and remediation. Very important to kind of make that distinction. Mitigation is the band-aid. Remediation is the actual solution. And then reporting, it allows you to learn, and it allows your new hires that come in after the fact to go back, have a read-through, and understand what the problems was. So that's in short, and I think I still have about 5 minutes, or 10 minutes even. So that's in short is basically incident management at Cloudflare. So any questions? Oh boy.
Hi, it's Aksu from Finland. So can you go back one slide? So I find that often when going through incidents, you discover something about your system that you didn't realize. Well, actually, I guess that's always what happens. But sometimes you also discover things that were not really involved in that incident, but that might become incidents in the future. How often do you have you developed a process for this?
Yeah, we had the exact same realization. So initially we were just reporting on incidents, and from incidents we have prevents, right? Where the prevents is, well, this broke, and this will make sure that never going to break again, right? That's kind of the relationship. But we also have a separate system, and that's FBOFOS. FBOFOS stands for failure possible. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's engineers thinking through their systems or going through an incident and then noticing, oh, this is what failed, but there's this other critical component that can fail in a slightly different way. We'll need to document that, and then we can mark prevents to that as well, even though it hasn't actually failed yet. We know that that possibility exists, therefore we should make sure that, you know, we make it safer, we make it better, we make it more secure.
Hi, Rory from Google. I got a two-parter question for you, sorry. The first is, you mentioned when you're doing a review of an incident that you will put in guardrails to prevent it from happening in the future. Did you ever encounter a situation where you put in guardrails and the incident did reoccur? And the second part is, what's your favorite Taylor Swift album?
Thanks for that second question. I realized that I forgot to mention that. But yeah, so first part, yes, that always happens, right? Like you try and you fail, and that sometimes happens. We've even had situations where the guardrails are the ones that cause incidents, which it happens, right? It's like you build in a system with the expectation of, oh, this is a failure we had. Here's the guardrail that prevents us from failing. But then you, like a couple of months later or years later, you have an incident where the guardrails are the root cause, or the guardrails are at least contributing in the amplification of the issue or preventing you from resolving the problem as fast as you can, because sometimes you kind of need those guardrails, right? Like that's the same way that pushing out software updates, we can't do anything global instantly, right? Which is a good thing, because that means that we can't globally break specific services, but that also means that if there is an issue globally with a specific service and we need to update that service, well, tough shit, but it's going to take 3 hours for you to update that service. There's no way around it. We can accelerate it, but you're going to be stuck to a specific time frame anyway. So yeah, that happens all the time. You live and you learn. And favorite Taylor Swift album right now, Midnights. The 3 a.m. version, definitely Midnights.
Hi, it's Aksu again. You mentioned that you use some Google services for some of your internal processes, and I don't require you to name names, but do you have alternatives in case Google sometimes messes up?
Yes, it's called IRC.
Hi, Oscar from New Day. During the mitigation and remediation periods, do you use automation?
Yes. So we use automation as much as we can, right? But sometimes, which is, for example, one of the issues we had in the incident in June, was that the problem itself made the routers that were problematic unreachable, which meant that our automation couldn't reach the routers. So at that point, chicken and an egg. So at that point, the only way we could get in is through a console server and then a console line, get into the router, do a rollback one, and you're fixed. So in that case, it is manual intervention and you need manual operator intervention, but we use automation as much as we can. Same thing with, for example, like the progressing of software through our fleet that's done through a system called Turnstile. Allows us to be very specific and very concrete about, well, this software version goes to that location at that point and things like that, to make sure that there's no human involvement or as little human involvement as possible.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter from Telia. So you mentioned reporting, right? How do you make sure that you have enough time to do the report properly? And how do you make sure that the quality of the reports on the incidents is actually good enough when you do the review?
So that's a bit personal responsibility, I guess, is the easiest way of answering that. The way that we do it within the network team is that we try to have someone that wasn't involved in the incident write the incident report. The reason for that is it's a good learning opportunity, right? It allows people to kind of go through the incident at a later time, have fresh eyes on the problem itself, and that can sometimes give us like a fresh perspective. But it also means that if they're lacking information, then we fucked up in the incident process, right? And then that's something that we can learn about, and then we can figure out, okay, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen again? But once that report is then written, then we'll have a review internally just within the network team. Usually one of the ICs or individual contributors that was involved in the incident will then go through the incident report, make some amendments if amendments are needed, add some graphs if there's like additional graphs, stuff like that. And once we're happy with that internally, then we can present it. Like I said, we do these once a week. So normally, that's for the entire previous week of incidents, we review them. You can ask for an exception, but you can only really ask for an exception once. Because otherwise someone's going to be on your ass and it's not going to be a fun day, right? So that's kind of how we make sure that people are held accountable and there's personal responsibility, but we also make sure that we have systems and processes in place that make it easy or as easy as possible for people to be successful in writing those incident reports.
Thank you.
Yes, Wilhelm from Via Europa. I was wondering, first of all, your status page, does that update automatically or is it a manual intervention? And then also, when an alert is triggered, how is the triage process going on?
So the status page is manual. We have done a couple automations that will automatically trigger a status page when we have a P1 or a P0 incident. It will automatically create like a very nondescript status page update, but we're not pushing that further for any of our other incidents because we've learned from customer feedback that vague status page updates are worse than no status page updates because it raises questions that we don't always answer. And some people have this like thing in their head where it's like they think the worst, which completely understandable. I'm an SRE. It's my job to think the worst, right? But that also just means that if you have a nondescript status page update, you instantly think, oh, dear God, all of my traffic is broken, right? So yes, for a very, very limited subset of problems. And secondly, for alerts, for triaging, each engineering team owns their own service. Right, so we have an SRE team, we have a network team, but we're there to help and enable the other engineering teams to do the best work possible, and to help them build proper alerting and proper metrics. But at the end of the day, if you're writing a service, then you're also the one responsible for that service in production. So these alerts will automatically just go to the team that wrote them. They'll do the triage because, again, they wrote the software. The basic expectation is that they probably know best. And once they understand either, it's like, this is a really big problem. We need to raise an incident because we need more engineering time or we need more engineers available to kind of work this out, then we do so. But most of the times when we write alerts, even for the network team, that doesn't inherently mean that we instantly create an incident, right? Like if we can resolve this within 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever our SLOs are, there's no need for an incident. We'll resolve it internally and we're good.
Yeah. Henrik Carl Peterson from Intembus. Just a comment. I just wish more people were open about incident and reporting so we can all get smarter instead of just having the report internally and not sharing with the world.
Yeah, I agree. Fully agree. Like, I'm really like very happy, very proud that I got into Cloudflare and that we've always had this very open culture on, you know, we fuck up and that's okay. And here's how we fucked up. Because, yeah, like you said, everyone can learn from this. More than happy to contribute to that.
Yeah. I think we are done with the questions now. Give Tom a big hand.
Thank you. Thanks.